Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I have the opportunity to work on a reel that John brought in. John's a member of a local saltwater fishing club. Brought me several reels, and it dawned on me as I was working on some of these that I don't think I have a Saltist with the star drag in my library. It may have been done a while ago, so it doesn't hurt to do a refresher. I started working on it. Some of the screws are a little bit loose, but I'm going to show you how to service the Saltist with the star drag, this one being the Daiwa Saltist 15H, and it's a nice reel. It's a narrow frame. It's used for inshore ocean jigging mostly. You can cast it beautifully. You can see how easily that spool is spinning and turning. And well, we'll just start by taking it apart and showing you how it's made and how to service it. And while I start by removing the exterior pieces, I'm going to start with the nut cap. And again, some of these screws have been pre-loosened because while I started before, I realized that I probably don't have this as a video. But as I do that, I want to encourage you to take pictures along the way, and more importantly, subscribe to my channel. And if you like the art of reel repair, if you like to see how reels are made, maybe you consider purchasing one. Maybe you just want to learn more about the dynamics behind a reel. Well, that's what this channel is all about, teaching you how to do it yourself and kind of spreading some information and some education on the reels and the manufacturers. So please subscribe, and if you do subscribe, please use that notification button. Well, I removed the nut cap for the handle. The handle is next. This is where the taking the pictures helps, because there's a lot of moving parts in this reel that you probably want to keep track of. Next up is a washer with a little fabric washer underneath it, and then the star adjuster. Then we have a spring. That's the tensioner for that piece. And most of the time you can work this adjuster nut off by hand. If you can't, use a wrench. If you need to, steady that post. Sometimes that post will start spinning. Most of the time it's when you try to put this thing back on, but just be able to use that. Notice on your nut now, there's one side that's solid, one side that has a groove in it, and that groove is where the spring goes. And where do all my parts go? Well, they go in a parts tray. So what I do here is I use a fast food container, and I try to group those parts that I take off by sub-assemblies so that when it's time to reinstall, I know where to look for them. Next, we have a series of tension washers. You can see them from the side, and they sit in a little noisemaker, and they should all come off together. And there's two curved ones underneath a flat washer, and then we have a washer that's a bearing shield here, and underneath that bearing shield we have a bearing, and we don't need to remove that piece because, well, that'll come off with the case. As I mentioned, I started doing this, so your screws are not going to be as loose as mine, but that's okay. They'll all be removed the same way. You need a Torx bit to take the 3 of the 4 screws out. And I think these screws are actually held in by little rubber retaining rings, the 3 with a Torx. I believe that's a Torx number 8. Just see on there. Nope, it's a 10. All right, so know that you have to have that. And then this one is a flat-bladed screwdriver screw for some reason. Now on some other of the Daiwas I've been working on, this is a longer screw, and it goes through to hold an eyelet for your support. But in this case it doesn't, but they kept that as a flat-bladed screw anyway. In case you're wondering what I'm using here, it's a palm grip. I think it's a snap-on with a end that's going to accommodate those bits. All right, those screws are off. You can remove the side plate. Well, they're not all the way off. Oops, I guess they are. Side plate comes off, and the spool comes out. And again, I did a little bit of this before. I like to tie off the braid when that comes in, just so it doesn't stick in the case when I go to remount. There is a bearing on this side of the spool. You want to oil that, test it, make sure that it works fine. There is no bearing on this side. There are 2 spool brakes on this side you want to pay attention to. When you're servicing the reel, make sure it's clean. This one's pretty clean. It's got a bearing in the case now. That's why you were seeing the spool spin so nice and free and easily. It's got a bearing on both sides, one on the spool here, one in the case here, both sides of the spool. And when you do that, just go ahead and reinsert the spool so you can keep it out of harm's way. Make sure that there's no braid that gets trapped in the ring here, and then you can just set that aside. That's a big enough part that I don't need to worry too much about the pieces going missing. This is the back side of the case now, and this case bridge, this assembly, is held on by 3 Phillips head screws. So let's get our Phillips head screwdriver out. This is a number 1 size Phillips head screw driver. I believe the screwdriver is available from Harbor Freight. You can use a micro driver here if you like, but this one seems to be fitting, so we're going to stay with that. When I take those screws out, they look like they have some Loctite on them or something. The blue, thank goodness. But just note that first turn might be a little hard to break that seal. Then they seem to come out okay. I'm laying them on my table now because I want to make sure that all of those are the same size screw. If they're not, I want to note the location of the one that may be longer or shorter or thicker or thinner or whatever, the one that's different, or more than one could be different. I've worked on a lot of Shimano reels where several different screws were used. Yeah, this one's a little tougher. If you find that it's a little tough, I can get some penetrating oil and hit the seam of it, right where the threads go into the case. And as you remove it, kind of tilt down, and that, there you go. That oil should help to free that screw up so that you don't damage it. Those 3 screws are the same. I'm going to take those and put those into a corner of the parts tray. And now we should be able to remove the assembly. Just turn it upside down. And we should be able to push out on this now. There we go. And then take a picture here, because this is what's going to be the assembly or the work end of the reel that you're going to need to work with. When you take that off, this side has the eccentric on it with a spring. The tag end of that spring lodges in a hole in this carrier here. It's probably another, I don't know, that length in, so that it'll protect it. And this is what's going to make the free spool go up and down. Let's move over to that. This case is clean. It has a bushing here, no bearing. It has an anti-reverse clutch here. Just go ahead and clean that up. Don't put any oil on that. And then let's go over to this side. The first 2 pieces I like to remove are these springs, because they tend to jump, and they are hard to find when they do jump. Again, a picture is helpful here. Next up, there's a little washer here that always seems to get caught. That's the back end bearing shield. And there's a little seam right here. It seems, for whatever, it's a little plastic or rubber band here. And a lot of times it's difficult to get the rest of the gear assembly out without removing that rubber band. Okay, I just moved over to a safety pin. I moved it on the inside. That generally will help you to roll it up and out that way. Just need to be careful. It is a rubber band. And once you get out of the groove, you can slide that up and off. Just takes a little patience, and when I was first starting reel repair, I got the advice, best thing you need for reel repair is patience and a sense of humor. They've been right all along. All right, now this will slide off easily, or should slide off easily. Then we can slide the main gear assembly off. I'll show you the click ratchet and the anti-reverse. This is your click ratchet. This is your anti-reverse over here. That usually falls off when you open up the case. One more piece here. Let's just take the click ratchet out. You want to clean that up because that anti-reverse is a friction device. That's the backup anti-reverse. It's not your primary. Let's clean that off. I'm going to remove the pinion gear. Same thing. Most of what you want to do in reel repair is clean, and you can see we're dry of grease here, so that's a problem with the reel. It needs to be relubricated. We have a yoke here, and the yoke has got an identifying side on it here. There's one side here with two ramps. Those are going to face in. Those will face in. The slot for the spool will also face in. So if you're having trouble, if you've reinstalled the reel and you're saying, well, geez, the free spool's just not working the way it should, chances are you've probably flipped that yoke around. There's also another bearing in the back here. Again, another thing that just makes it run as smooth as it does. I'm using that penetrating oil as a degreaser now, and we're just kind of mopping up here. There's not a lot of grease on here, but whatever grease was in this assembly kind of fell to the side, and that's why your gear is as dry as it is. I'm going to take some fishing reel oil now, oil that bearing behind. The pinion gear is going to sit inside that bearing. And well, we can put some of these pieces and parts back together again. Let's start with that yoke. Remember what I said, there's a ramp side here, so that's facing the spool. All you want to do is get a little bit of grease onto the shoulders of the yoke. Then the slotted side faces the spool as well. And I'm using Penn Precision Reel Grease for this. And I don't really care what reel grease you use, but please use a fishing reel grease. Okay, the yoke and assembly can go back in now, just like that. Pull your jack up so that it seats nice and low. Next up then is our click ratchet. Our click ratchet has got a rectangular center, and there's a rectangular post on the bottom here. So you can move that anti-reverse dog out of the way, and that anti-reverse dog has got two fingers on it. You may or may not be able to see that, but you want to split the ratchet with those two fingers. One goes high, one goes low. With that set, take the shim washer that goes between the main gear and that assembly, bring that in, and now we can take the pieces out of the main gear, clean the main gear. And again, I think if there's a fault with this one, it's everything's dry. So these are Carbon-Tex washers, and just examine them, make sure that they are nice and sharp with the grids on them. Clean out anything that may be inside the main gear. Carbon-Tex washers are optional in terms of greasing or oiling because they're non-permeable. So if you do put grease on them, wipe it off. It would only be a light sheen at best. And generally speaking, most folks do not grease a Carbon-Tex washer, including myself. All right, main gear goes back on now. Make sure that you made it to the pinion gear and that it's all the way down. Then we have a 6 series of washers here. I just got asked this question the other day, which side do I use on these? Some of these have different sides. In this case, not the case, but sometimes you'll find one side this way and one fine with this sharp grid. It really doesn't matter. What matters is that you put them all in the same direction. First one in is what's called a keyed washer. It's the thinner of these two, but it has a rectangular center just like that ratchet. We'll put that second washer in. The middle washer has these 4 studs on them, and that's called a eared washer. Those go in the slots in the hole. Next up is the top drag washer. Then the thicker of the washers. Then our little sleeve for the drag adjuster. With the glove off, I want to put that shim washer on the top. That's for that lower piece of the bearing. Now I can take that rubber band, if you will, whatever it is. Now I need the dexterity, that's why the glove is off, of course. Just want to catch a corner and walk it around. And once it's over, I find that this safety pin helps me to walk it down if you don't use something like this, it tends to get stuck in the grooves. And then make sure that locks in through the slot. All right, good there. We're good here. A little bit of grease onto the little eccentric lever. Spring is working. You can put a little bit of grease into that back bushing if you want for the spool. Again, do not grease the anti-reverse. Well, we're set up to reinstall this. Before we put the case back on, make sure you find your two yoke springs. Bring those on. And then we can grab the case, bring the case on. And typically what you want to do is work from underneath here to make sure that this all seats properly. And a key here is that you need to lock in the lever with that hole in the eccentric, and you'll know you've done that if you can move this. Oh, you gotta hold it down. Well, we're working. Okay, let's grab the 3 screws and tighten that down. Then I'll show you what I was doing there to determine if it was working or not. It wants to kick back on me without the screws holding it in place. That makes sense because you have those yoke springs there. All right, there's one. Go over to the other side for 2. So what have we done so far? We've taken it completely apart. We noticed that it was very dry from a grease standpoint. We lubricated all of the bearings and the gears with either greases or oils. Made sure it was all clean. And well, now it's time for reassembly. Let's show you what I was testing there. So you need to, when you set your plate, there's a hole in that jack. I should have pointed that out earlier, I guess. You need to make sure now that this pulls in and out like that when it's okay. Just checking it all, making sure we have the anti-reverse, which we do. All right, time to put this back together and give it that test. Hold your spool. You can put a little bit of grease onto the shaft of the spool. I like to put this on with the free spool released. And then let's align the inner plate. There's 2 studs in the case that need to align too. They're 2 pins. I need to switch my tool over to drive mode. Make sure that you have a tight seam where you just put the case on. If it's not, don't go putting screws in there. You're only going to bind something up. You need to see what the obstruction is or what the reason is behind it, not sitting nice and tight against that frame. Sometimes it's a part out of alignment. Sometimes that anti-reverse dog kicks off and gets trapped. There's all kinds of little things that can happen. Just make sure that you pay attention to that and don't force anything as you're going about to reinstall. All right, these are the 3 that are the Torx screws. And we have the 1 flat blade screw, which I'll go to my parts tray for. And it tightens up the side plate now. When you're doing a reel like this, always check behind the reel as well. Sometimes the face screws here are not the only ones that are holding this case on. Sometimes you'll find a screw or 2 on the back side here, so just be aware of that. There is that small bearing shield that went in next. Then we had the noisemaker assembly. I'm going to break this open so that you can see what we have. We have the click first. The bowl faces up. We have 2 tension washers, which are bent washers. Don't unbend them. The first I put with the cup facing up. The second I put with the cup facing down. And then we have a flat washer that goes on top of that. So that's how the washers go. Next up then is the adjuster nut. And this uses a system with a spring so that you can't inadvertently tighten or loosen the drag by hitting that star adjuster. what's happening here is your nut is going to adjust the stack. That spring that sits on top of it is going to push the star adjuster off of the nut. You have that square back here, and well, to readjust you have to push down on the star adjuster to be able to turn it. Next are the two pieces. There's a flat kind of a plastic washer, and we have the metal washer sits on top of that. This had the handle in the inner piece. If you're doing this as a business as opposed to doing it for yourself, you need to know where your customers set that piece so that you return it to them in the same way that they got it. This is a leveraged handle, so it can be used in one of two slots. You just need to make sure which two slots it is. A pen wrench works on this cap for the Daiwa reel. It's a scalloped cap, and you need to make sure that you align the scallop in that nut with the hole for the retention screw or lock screw. Bring that in. That's the last piece. The good news is there are no more pieces in my parts tray. And it's time to give it a test, see how we did. Okay, let's give it that final test then. Let's go to free spool. Spins nice and free and easy. This reel will cast a very long way. Put it into gear, turn it, nice and smooth operation. Test to make sure that you have your drag set. It's holding nicely. You can back it off now. And that's it. That's your Daiwa Saltist 15H. It's a beautiful reel. Again, it's meant for inshore fishing, jigging, casting. It's a very nice reel, and for well, pretty big fish. It says it's got a gear ratio of 6.4 to 1, and it will hold about 260 yards of 40-pound braid or 330 yards. Nice capacity for 30-pound braid, which is about what you should be fishing on this reel. Okay, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed it. Again, if you're still with me and you like these types of videos and you haven't subscribed, please take the opportunity to subscribe and use that notification button. If you've liked the video, please indicate that with a like click. To our first responders, our police, fire, rescue, and all that are helping us to stay safe, thank you for your efforts and your dedication to public service. And to everybody, well, this is an example of a nice reel that well, ran a little dry, and it needs to be maintained just like all reels do. Make sure you take the opportunity to service your reel. I recommend on an annual basis. Get them ready and keep them fishing. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.